Hello everyone, my name is Vishal Kotecha. I am a software engineer having more than 5 years of experience. Recently I came to know that many developers want to learn Spring Security, but they are facing some challenges one way or another. So I decided to put up a video where I would be demonstrating Spring Security and we will go step by step. So let me create a Spring Boot project at first place. This name of this project will be Spring Security Demo. I'm just making it short SS Demo. Here it will be Spring Security. I'm going to use Java 8 version with Maven jar packaging. For this Spring Boot project, I will need total 4 dependencies. The first will be Spring Web, of course, and second will be Spring Security because this is a demo of Spring Security. Now I would need to use database because in real world we will be using database for authentication purpose. So I'm going to use MySQL database, so I will need MySQL driver here, and I'm going to use JPA, Spring Data JPA. That's all. So when we create this project, Spring Boot project, for the first time, it is going to download all the dependencies, so it is going to take some time. And once all the dependencies are downloaded, then you will be able to see a project structure like this. Now without writing any piece of code, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to try and run this application. So I'm going to say run as Spring Boot app. Now again, when we run this application for the first time, it is going to take some significant amount of time, but that's okay because the consequent operations will be much faster than this. Now what we want to see is what happens if we try to run this without doing anything. Now it says application failed to start. It says failed to configure data source. The URL attribute is not specified. What happened here? Here is what happened. We said that we are going to use a MySQL database, but we did not specify the database configuration in this application.properties. So for the time being, I'm just going to copy paste this configuration. It has nothing much. It's just the database data source URL, which is going to be the JDBC MySQL connection string. It is localhost because the MySQL server I have set up locally. The port is default one 3306. This would be the schema name, and I'm saying that create database if not exist is equal to true, means it is going to create a schema if it does not exist in my local. So if we see here, uh, I have already this, so I'm going to drop this schema. Yep. So as we see here, I don't have any schema. This is a default one generated by MySQL server. My MySQL server username password are root, and I'm going to say hibernate ddl auto is equal to update because I'm going to create one user entity and I want the table to be created automatically in my database. Now with this configuration, let's see if I can run the application now. Okay, so the application is started successfully. Let me try to open the browser to see whether we can see anything. Okay, so we see a login screen. Now how did this happen? We did not write any code for this, correct? So this happened because when we add a dependency of Spring Security, the Spring Security creates a sign-in page automatically for us. And because there is a sign-in page, there must be some username and password to be provided in order to log in, correct? Now here is what we have. In the console, we see this line, using generated security password. So here Spring Security generates a default password for us each time when we start the application. So I'm just copying this password here and pasting in the password field. What is the username? The default username in Spring Security is user. Okay, so after signing, it says there was an unexpected error, 404 status not found. What happened here? Well, there was a login page and we were able to log in, but we did not tell the application where to go after login. So it says 404, I don't know where to go. So now let's tell the application where to go after successful authentication. So I'm going to create a class. This is the entry point in Spring Security application, web security config, and this will be in the config package. So once this class is created, I'm going to extend the web security configure adapter class. Now, when we do this, when we create a class and we extend the web security configure adapter class, now this becomes our entry point, and this is the place where we provide all configurations for Spring Security mostly. Now we need to override a couple of methods here. Let's see which are those. So there is a method called configure. Now there are three versions of this. One takes authentication manager builder, another takes HTTP security, and the third one takes web security. Now because we want to handle the security related part, the HTTP security part, because we want to be able to tell the application where to go post authentication. Also we would like to handle which requests will be authenticated and which will be not. So we are going to override this configure method at first place. Now here, what will be the configuration? So it says HTTP, we will say authorized requests, we will say any request should be authenticated, we will use and this is a builder pattern, by the way. So we are able to write the code like this, and we will be using form login, and we will say the default success URL will be this. Now I need to provide some default success URL, meaning once the login is successful, it will go, it will be redirected to this URL. Another alternative, one more alternative is this is success. There is something called success handler. So we can create one class and we can override the method, and we can basically specify that custom class over here. Just to keep things simple, I am going to use the default success URL. I'm going to say once the login is successful, I should go to the endpoint called welcome. Now, as of now, our application does not have this welcome endpoint anywhere. So let me quickly create one. I'm going to create a controller class for this. So mostly in our application, what happens is after login, we go to some dashboard. So let me call this dashboard controller for the time being, and I'm going to create this in controller package. So this will be a REST controller, and I'm going to say request mapping for this controller will be welcome. Now I need one endpoint, so I will create one response entity will be my return type, and I'm going to just say welcome. I'm going to return a response entity dot OK. Because this is 200 status. So in this OK, I'm going to say body will be welcome. Yeah, just a plain string for the time being. Yeah, this will do. And here it's asking me to provide the type. So done, and I'm going to say this will be get mapping. Okay, so whenever we hit this welcome, it is going to hit this particular endpoint and it's going to return the welcome string. That's all. Now coming back here, so this means that we should be able to log in now, and post login there should be displayed just one string called welcome. Let's see if this works now. I'm just running this application again. Okay, now again a new password is generated for us. I'm going to copy this and I'm going to open this. So username is user. Nope, still did not found. It says still not found because we did not annotate this classes. So we need to use the configuration and enable web security annotations. Let's try one more time if this works now. So I'm just going to copy this password again. We are going in trial and error mode so that we get to know. No, it still says 404. Something is wrong. Yep. So we were able to see that we were able to tell the application where to go after a successful login. Now here is a little problem. Each time a new password is generated by Spring Security, we don't want that. For our testing purpose, what we want is we want to create our own username and password within the application. We are going to keep it in memory. We are not going to use database directly. So we are taking one more step here. So as we saw that there are three versions of this configure method, we are going to use the another method which says authentication manager builder for this. So what this will do is, let's see, it has auth. So auth dot we can say in memory authentication we want to perform, and for this authentication practically we need to use only two things, user and password, correct? So it says with user I'm going to tell user Vishal and the password is, let's say, test. That's all. So now with this configuration, Spring Security should stop generating the default stop generating the password each time, because I'm going to use such in-memory authentication now. So let's see if that happens. Oh, we got some error message here. So it says that error creating being with resource being instantiation failed, cannot pass a null granted authority collection. What does this mean? It means that whenever Spring Security allows us to perform authentication, it needs some sort of granted authority collections, meaning the set of roles. So normally in any web application there are several roles like admin, user, moderators, and so on, correct? So now we need to specify the granted authorities, the authorities. As of now I don't want to give any authorities because that's not my scope as of now. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say collections dot empty list. So because it was earlier being passed as a null, it complained that cannot pass a null granted authority collection, but now I'm saying that it's an empty list. So now let's see whether this helps. So as you can see, we are literally going into trial and error mode where we are trying some things, we are getting some errors, and we are solving those errors. Okay, it says the port is already in use, so we started this application twice. Let me stop and run this again. Okay, so now we are able to start the application successfully. Let's see if I can use this credential, username Vishal and password is test. Okay, I'm coming back here. This login, I'm going to say Vishal and here test. So nothing happened on the screen. Let's see. Okay, in the backend we got bunch of errors. It says there is no password encoder mapped for the ID null. What does this mean now? It means that Spring Security needs some password encoder, because it says I cannot store the password in plain text. That's not how I function, correct? So let's give Spring Security a password encoder bean, and we'll say password encoder. We are going to return this password encoder implementation will be bcrypt. So this is a standard password encoder in Spring Security. I'm going to import this bcrypt password encoder. Okay, I need to say new. Now I'm going to specify this as a bean. Okay, with this bean configuration, it should stop complaining, because now it has got the bean ID, right? It has got the ID. It's not null anymore. So let's try now. Okay, the application is started. Let's see. Now username is Vishal and password is test. It says bad credentials. How that happened? So here we see that a warning is generated. There is no error, but there is a warning. It says the encoded password does not look like bcrypt. So Spring Security complains here silently, because it's a warning. It says that you specified that you are going to use this password encoder, but with the password that you provided, it does not look like that you have encrypted using this password encoder. So what we need to do is we need to encode this password now using this password encoder bean. We are going to say password encoder dot encode, and now we will encode this test. Okay. So with this configuration, let's see if things work as expected. So username is Vishal, password is again test. Yep, we are able to get this done now. So far we used Spring Security default generated password. We were able to redirect to some specific endpoint of API, and after that we were able to create some in-memory authentication where we specified the username and password by ourselves, so we were not depending upon the generated password by Spring Security. Okay, now coming to the next point, very important piece. Normally we do not write username and password in like this, right? We store them in the database. So now we want to perform authentication against the database. So what will change here? This part will change essentially. So I'm going to comment this out, because in-memory authentication will not be used anymore. Instead, what will be used is we will use something called user detail service, auth.userdetailService. Now this will be a bean. So now we need to create a bean for this user detail service. I'm going to explain how these things is going to be configured over there. So I'm going to say public user details service, and now we need to create our own custom user detail service. So I'm going to say return new custom user details service, and this will be a bean. Now this class does not exist today, so I'm going to create it. Create class. Now as you can see, when we created this class, it implemented this user detail service interface, and we need to override the load user by username method. Now this will be a service, so we need to annotate this with @service. Load user by username will depend upon the database user. So now what we are going to do is we need to have something called user repository or user DAO. Now we are going to say find by username, and we will say we will pass this username here, and we will expect the user here. So user is equal to user dot find by username. If this user is equal to null, then we will throw the new user not found, username not found exception. This is a default exception class from the Spring itself. We will say user not found. Otherwise, if user is there, then we will return custom user details, and we are going to pass this user. Now let me create the missing classes quickly here. Now this user DAO will be field, create field user DAO. Now this will be user DAO repository. I'm going to inject it using AutoWired. So because I don't have any user class or user DAO class today, let me create them quickly. So I'm going to first create the user class. It will be inside the entity package. Now this user will represent the database table itself. So I'm going to say private integer ID, private string first name, private string last name, private string the username using which he is going to log in, and the private string password. That's all. So we are going to generate the getters and setters for all. Now this will be a database entity, so I'm going to use the JPA annotations here, @entity and @table. Now I'm going to use this as a primary key, so I need to specify as ID. This will be an auto incremented one, so I'm going to set @generated value, and the strategy will be auto. So I'm going to say strategy is generation type auto. I don't need to specify column for each because it will automatically create like first underscore name, last underscore name. This is the default strategy that is used by Hibernate. Now when we use the JPA is just a specification. The default provider for this JPA will be Hibernate. So now we are done with the entity. Now we can proceed with the DAO layer quickly. So I'm going to create an interface. I'm going to say user DAO. I'm going to say in the DAO itself. So I'm going to extend JPA repository here. Now it will be user entity and the ID will be integer. So that's all. I'm going to say user find by username. This is a JPA way of writing the queries. If you are not familiar with, I would recommend to go and find some resources relevant to this. Okay, so let's see. This user is imported now. The user DAO and all. Okay. Okay. What's wrong here? Okay, if it's null, then username not found exception. Now custom user details is something that we still need to create. So I'm going to create this class custom user details. When we create this, it implements the user detail interface, and now we are going to perform a couple of things quickly. We have to use the serial version UID as it requires, and I'm going to create a constructor which takes in the the user entity. So I'm going to say user and this dot user is equal to user. Now I'm going to create this field quickly, and we are done. Now normally what will happen is this get authorities, it will be like return user dot get roles, something like that we will have in our application. But as of now, since this is a very basic version of this, I'm going to say return new array list. Get password will be return user dot get password. This username we will say return user dot get username. Using this, it performs the authentication. So this is the intermediate layer for Spring security. Now these fields, is account non-expired, non-logged, its credentials not expired. So these things usually we can have this in database user table itself, and we can say like return user dot is account non-expired. But for the time being, we are going to say is account non-expired. Yes, it's not expired. Is it's non-logged as well. The credentials are not expired. Yes, and the user is enabled as well. So we are done here. Now coming back here, okay, so I think we are done with the coding part. Yep, so let's try and see. But one more thing before we try and see something. Now we have written the we have written the code for how do we perform authentication. So basically we need to specify the user detail service where we create a bean for the custom user detail service. Now this will implement the user detail service interface, and it will have this method load user by username where our own database tables will be used to authenticate against, and we are throwing some exception if user is not found, and if it's there then we are going to pass it to the constructor, and accordingly all the details will be populated. So now in order to perform authentication we need to have a record in the database, but till now there would be no record. So either I have to create one API to create a user, or I can use some shortcut like this. So I'm going to perform a quick shortcut. I'm going to say public void generate or encode password. I'm going to write this method over here, and I'm going to say password encoder dot encode, and I'm going to say test123 maybe. So I want to use this password, but it has to be encoded first. So control encoded password, and I want to print this. I'm going to say sysout encoded password. Okay, so now whenever the application runs, I want to ensure that this method runs. So I'm going to say post construct. So this method will be executed after the application is launched. So let me try to run this application, and because we use the annotations here, the tables also should get generated. So let's try running this application now. Okay, perfect. So it generated this encoded password for me. So what I'm going to do is, let me refresh the schema here. Okay, so one schema is created and one table is created along with the Hibernate sequence, because we use the auto as generation strategy. So it created the sequence for auto incremented column. Now I'm going to perform select star from user. So currently there is no record. I'm going to create one record quickly. First name is Vishal, last name is Kotecha. The password is what we got as generated one, and username is V Kotecha. Let's say okay. So yep, the record is inserted. So with the username V Kotecha and password is test123, because I encoded the password test123. So I should be able to log in now. Let's see if that happens. Create open the new private window to avoid any caching related problems. Localhost 8080. Yep, so The username was vkotecha and the password was test123. We got some unexpected error here. It says 404. Okay, let's see what went wrong. So we have this custom user details as a service marked here, and we have this user DAO. Do we need to specify anything else other than this find by username we have? So this is perfect. Find by username, web security config. Okay, so I don't see any problems as such. Let me try one more time. Yep, sometimes this happens, some temporary glitch. So now we are able to successfully authenticate against the database.